There are some characters that have two names, like for example Gino Hernandez is sometimes called Zino Hernandez. This may be because there was a wrestler called Gino Hernandez and Shueisha wanted to avoid copyright. This may be true, although there is the case of Carlos Santana who has the same name as a Mexican guitarist and nothing happened, but whatever. There is also the case of Brian, whose surname, due to Japanese phonetics, can be read both as Cryford or Clyford. The surname Cryford is mostly utilized in non-official translations of the manga, but the surname Clyford is utilized as its official name. And there is the case of Xiao Chungyuan, who is also known as Shoshung. This is due to how Japanese and Chinese people read kanji. The character's name kanji is this. Read in Japanese is Shoshunko, but read in Chinese is Xiao Chungyuan. And the same goes for the rest of the Chinese characters, where the non-official translations utilize their Japanese names, while the official ones use the Chinese names, although we don't know if this was Takahashi's intention. There's also the case of Takashi Sugimoto, who, during the Real Japan 7 arc, utilizes the fake name of Koji Yoshikawa. Apparently, this is a reference to a comedian called Sanma Akashiya, whose real name is Takafumi Sugimoto. This is an old urban legend that says that everything in Captain Tsubasa was a dream, and Tsubasa wakes up without legs. Why without legs? That's because he lost them in the accident that he had when he was a toddler. I mean the scene where a truck hits him and the ball saves him. In this story, the ball doesn't save him and he breaks both of his legs. This theory was super popular back in the day, maybe because pretty much all of the Captain Tsubasa animes up to that point had an open ending. So many fans believed that this was the real ending of the series, but was censored due to being very sad. Nowadays, we know that this is obviously fake, as the series is still running, but there are a lot of people that genuinely believe it, even to the extent of asking Takahashi himself about it. Although that's like asking Akira Toriyama if Dragon Ball AF is canon, but whatever. As a fun fact, Once Caldas, Deportivo Pereira's rival, same team that had the Tifo that we saw earlier, raised a banner of Tsubasa without legs, and the banner said Tu sueño mi historia, which translates to Your dream, my history, which is pretty funny if you ask me. Many fans pushed for Osura Tsubasa to become the mascot of the World Cup held in Japan and Korea in 2002. Finally, FIFA did not pick him, using instead the original mascot designs called Atto, Kaz, and Nick. During the 1983 anime, there was a filler arc created so they didn't catch up to the manga, placed right before the match against Toho. This filler is a hypothetical tournament between Japan and some European nations. In these European nations we can see characters like Karl-Heinz Schneider and Elcid Piard, although with different designs and personalities. These characters actually predate their apparition from the manga, thus being beta versions. There's also a beta version of Carlos Santana in one of the movies, which also predates his World Youth apparition. It's most likely that Takahashi was the one behind the concept and names of these characters. There are inconsistencies between the hair color of certain characters from the manga to the games or anime. For example, in Shin Captain Tsubasa and in J, we can see Gino Hernandez have dark brown hair, but in the manga and in more recent animes he appears with blonde hair. Another example would be Mueller, who in the manga has blonde hair but in the animes and games he has brown hair. Why is this? This may be due to misinterpretation of Takahashi's gray coloring in the manga. Fully blonde characters in manga are usually drawn with white hair, like Schneider or Levin. For darker colors they use gray. But for some reason Takahashi uses gray for drawing blonde characters too. This is where the misinterpretation happens, because gray colors are typically used for darker hair colors. Throughout the manga, we have been shown that Hyuga really likes Coca-Cola. Even in the anime they have shown Hyuga drinking it. and even he was confronted by Maki about drinking solely carbonated drinks. The question is that many people have theorized that this addiction could be one of the reasons that he didn't have a proper body condition to play for Juventus. In episode 35 of Captain Tsubasa J, Aoi Shingo arrives to an Italian airport, where at the same time Italy's team arrive. Aoi kicks a ball towards the crowd, which is stopped by none other than Roberto Baggio, the famous Italian player. This is pretty much the only strict apparition of a real-life player in a Captain Tsubasa anime, not counting the Nagatomo special or the 2018 Season 2 openings. There have been a lot of Captain Tsubasa references in other media. For example, in Yu Yu Hakusho, the main character, Urameshi Yusuke, is seen sacrificing himself to save the life of a young boy who was going to get hit by a car. The boy was also playing with a ball. We'll learn later that Yusuke sacrificing himself for nothing because the boy was going to get hit, but the ball miraculously saved him. Pretty much a reference to the beginning of Captain Tsubasa. There's also a reference in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure Part 5 manga, where a character named Guido Mista turns on a TV inside of Coco Jumbo and the TV shows Captain Tsubasa, with even the character mentioned in the anime. Apparently, this reference is due to Hirohiko Araki, JoJo's mangaka, seeing Captain Tsubasa on the TV in Italy. Also, there's another reference in the Haikyuu manga where some twins say that they can replicate the Skylab Hurricane. Then there's a reference in the Jujutsu Kaisen anime where they mimic the opening of the 1983 series. There's also a reference in the video game Cyberpunk 2077 where quite early in the main story, the main character, for the need of a mission, will be given a fake identity. Harry Cromwell, his partner, will also have a fake identity, called Ramon Victorino, and we need to meet someone named Hajime Taki. I'll stop here for the sake of the video, but feel free to add some more references in the comments. Millennium Dream is a special manga released in the year 2000 that seems to be a game simulation between Brazil and Japan, where Tsubasa, Hyuga, Aoi and Wakabayashi are playing the Olympics final with some real-life players. This special manga stood up from the rest because it contains quote-unquote spoilers for at the time upcoming arcs of Captain Tsubasa, I mean the Olympics and the Champions League, where we can see things like Hyuga returning to Juventus, Wakabayashi going to Bayern, and Misaki going to PSG. We can also see Tsubasa and Sanae's kids. This manga also has the apparition of Xiao, who temporarily cures Tsubasa's injuries with acupuncture, which is theorized to happen in Rising Sun. For the 2019 Club World Cup held in Qatar, Adidas created a ball named Tsubasa, a ball which design is based on manga panels. If it isn't obvious to see the reference, years later they used the same ball in the J-League and the 2020 Tokyo Olympics, but with a picture of Tsubasa and a girl named Kaede, character which is from a light novel created by Yoichi Takahashi. Have you ever noticed that Jito says at the end of every sentence? This is due to an untranslatable joke from the manga. The thing is that people from Nagasaki, which is where Jito lives, have a dialect in which some sentences end with the suffix tai. The joke is that Jito pretty much does it all the time. There have been various characters that according to fans have been nerfed. For example, Stefan Levin, Carlos Santana, and the most well-known, Salinas, the Brazilian goalkeeper that, due to the arduous training from Roberto and Santana with a skywing shot, could easily catch Hyuga's ratio shot, a shot that, at the time, hasn't been catched by anyone. But then later in Rising Sun, we can see that Salinas can catch almost anything, and not only that, he doesn't seem to appear anywhere in Next Dream. This is a rather scandalous theory that says that Tsubasa's mom cheats on his husband with Roberto. This theory has its basis in the fact that Tsubasa's mom is always alone, because Tsubasa's father is a sea captain and is always away from home. So in this theory, Tsubasa's mom has affairs with Roberto during the elementary school arc. A rather weird theory if you ask me. There have been various lesser known players in Captain Tsubasa. Some of these don't even have names, such is the case of America's captain, Colombia's captain, Ghana's captain, etc. There are also players with little relevance like Zangief from Uzbekistan, Raymond Chandler from Cameroon, or even Calles from Greece, player that is tied with Schneider as the player with most scored goals in the Bundesliga. For Japanese little relevance players, we can look at Toshiya Okano from Real Japan 7, who apparently plays in Urawa Red Diamonds, although we don't see him in Road to 2002. There's also the players for Japan's sub-20 team that Takeshi leads in Golden 23. During the manga, Takahashi has created various clubs that don't exist in real life, such as Bara FC, Brazilian club where Carlos Santana, before called Carlos Bara, played, or Bolanos FC, club from the Argentinian second division where Gakuto Igawa played. There's also the case of the club where Ryoma Hino played before joining Real Japan 7, club that in the manga was called Montevideo FC. But since there are a lot of clubs in Montevideo, we don't know if this club is fictional or not. In fact, some fans theorize that it could be Montevideo Wanderers. It is unknown why Takahashi created these clubs, although the case of Bara FC makes sense since it will generate bad publicity to a famous club. Takahashi was creator of various pieces of media, not only manga, but even light novels or animes. The most well-known work of Takahashi apart from Captain Tsubasa is called Hungry Heart Wild Striker, a manga that received an anime adaptation. Then there's also the light novel called Golden Kills that also had an anime adaptation, although this adaptation is lost media. Another light novel would be the already mentioned Soccer Shoujo Kaede. Then some football mangas like Pride or Striker Gym, and some mangas that are not about football like The Legend of Sho and Ace. He also directed an anime special in collaboration with the Paralympic Games in which they play blind football. As you can already tell, Takahashi never moves from the sports genre. There have been various card games related to the franchise, some official, some not, like for example a card game promoted by the J-League or a card game based on the 2018 anime. There's also a non-official card game called Captain Tsubasa All-Star Game, although to be honest I couldn't find how any of these games are meant to be played, so if you know, leave it in the comments. In the Captain Tsubasa animes, there have been various forms of filler. The most well-known ones are from the 1983 series that has filler like Tsubasa meeting Sanae and some Nakatsu guys before it actually happens, Hyuga's childhood and how his father dies, Misugi being operated to fix his heart disease, episode summaries, and the already mentioned international tournament that has Bette Schneider and Pierre. In Shin Captain Tsubasa there's actually not much filler, but they got some characters' backstory and a lot of other stuff. In Captain Tsubasa J, the majority of the filler is the story of Roberto's mother or the story of Misaki trying to leave his father because he didn't want to move, or giving Furano a little bit more depth with a player named Nakagawa and Furano's coach dying after the Furano vs Meiwa match. In Road 2002 there isn't much filler. In fact, they got things from the manga like Diaz Maradona style goal. Also in this adaptation they changed the personalities of the characters like Diaz being more arrogant or Pierre being more quote-unquote elegant. And in the 2018 series the filler is almost non-existent, with the exception of maybe the second season having a little bit more depth in the Japan vs Bayern match, and maybe some of the encounters of Sanae and Kanda that should have happened in the first season but due to time constraints they were cut. In the video games and anime of Captain Tsubasa, a phenomenon called whitewashing occurs, which is basically turning a dark-skinned character and making them more light-skinned. Some examples of this is Carlos Santana, Natureza, and Ramon Victorino. A complete opposite of this happens with characters like Roberto Ongo and Juan Diaz, whose skin tone is canonically lighter, but in some of the animes and video games, they are shown with more dark skin tones. Takahashi has been accused of something called same-face syndrome, which is basically when an artist draws various characters with the same face. It is pretty evident that this is the case in Captain Tsubasa, mainly because the characters have indeed similar faces, like for example Matsuyama, Misaki, Misugi and Sorimachi being almost identical. In the animes, they sometimes start to fix this, changing the way the head, eyes or nose are drawn, or by simply changing the colors of the eyes and hair. Abdulrahman Shuaib is an animator from Kuwait that is pretty well known for making Captain Tsubasa animations, most notably animating the World Youth part of the story as a supposed continuation of Captain Tsubasa J. Recently, he's been more focused on animating various matches from the Rising Sun arc, so stay tuned. The famous mobile game Captain Tsubasa Dream Team has an interesting exclusive version only for mainline China. This version is not controlled by Keylab, but rather a company called Beijing Gaia Interactive Entertainment. Previously, it was known for being a supposed better version of the game, mainly because it had a PT system in which you can have medals that can redeem banner exclusive players, mechanic that wasn't at the time in the original game, and also replacing the official uniforms with the manga versions. Nowadays, it's known for the complete opposite, mainly because it has players with the official kits for some clubs, such is the case of Schneider with his Hamburg uniform or Ino with his Napoli uniform. It is unknown if these versions are officially licensed or not. You know, one detail that I always liked about the Captain Tsubasa manga is how the international players only understand the language they already know. For example, Genso fills the role of a translator between German and Japanese characters, or Tsubasa talking to Diaz in Portuguese because Spanish and Portuguese are pretty similar, or Xiao talking in Chinese with Aoi and Tamotsu and them not understanding him. Sadly, later in the manga it seems that this is not respected as much. This is also omitted in various animes, although it is understandable because it could be difficult for a voice actor to talk a language they don't know. For a long period of time, the Captain Tsubasa manga has been only exclusively on Japan, probably because of copyright issues with clubs and sports brands that appear throughout the manga without their permission, although this is technically fair use, but whatever. Because of this, the Captain Tsubasa manga arrived kinda late to the other side of the world, for example in China, Germany, France, Argentina, etc. Now the manga is available in most parts of the world, although for most countries only the original one, because Shueisha is apparently scared of releasing the rest due to copyright issues. Although in China they actually reached up to Road 2002, while in France a company named J-Lu managed to launch the World Youth manga. Also, most of these translations respected the original Japanese names, being possibly the first step to standardize the original names, although some editions like the French one, they call the manga Oliver y Tom Captain Tsubasa, using both names for the series.